CLNSRadio.com, the home of Internet Sports Talk Radio.
Anyway, who's our guest? You got it right, Amaechi.
Okay. John Amaechi, former NBA athlete and the only NBA former or current player who is openly gay. He will be joining us this evening. Sounds good to me. So, yes, John Amaechi, he'll be joining us here probably in the next 15 minutes or so. And also we're going to be bringing on shortly CLNS Radio beat writer, featured columnist, pregame host, Nick Santacandro. Santacandro is the one who actually started the dialogue between CLNS Radio and Mr. Amaechi by writing a terrific article on gay athletes in the United States playing professional sports. So we're going to get Nick on for a little bit. Nick's going to stay on the line and interview John with us, so we're really looking forward to tonight's show.
And if you don't think John Amaechi is a relevant guest for tonight's Celtics Late Night Show, no, he never played for the Celtics, but he did play, Brandon, for the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Orlando Magic, the Utah Jazz, the Houston Rockets, and the New York Knicks. He turned down several $1 million, I think like $9 million or something, from the Los Angeles Lakers to stay with the Orlando Magic for $600,000. Now, if that alone doesn't get him on our list of guests, nothing will. He snubbed the Lakers.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who does anything negatively towards the Lakers, you'd think Celtics fans would have some respect for that. So,
no doubt about it. An intriguing and interesting guest, John Amaechi, former NBA player, openly gay former athlete, and, you know, that probably being the smaller part of his profile, as he is also a life coach, he's a psychologist, he helps in crisis management. He's been in touch with Penn State University regarding the Sandusky scandal, you know. So John Amaechi, really a very distinguished, intriguing, interesting guest. And I found myself in between this evening working, and then I took a little break before coming on the air, and a couple questions were posed to me, you know, why is John Amaechi on this show tonight? And that alone, I think, is enough reason to have him on the show tonight. It can educate some of our listeners, not only educate, but also, you know, enlighten them to what the life in the NBA is like, not only for a straight person, but also a gay person, because, you know, if you, as people, don't think there are gay people alongside of you at church, at the mall, you know, you're crazy, because they're everywhere. They're human beings, and John Amaechi is one of them. NBA player, distinguished professional, and world-known athlete. He's been on Oprah. BPaul, why haven't you been on Oprah?
Yeah, I had to decline the request. I think that was one of the CLNS radio show nights. I had to decline the request.
Oprah understood it. She never would not fulfill her obligations, and I thank you for choosing me over Oprah Winfrey. Good stuff.
I think that was a night that you were actually you had something to do, so I took advantage of the situation and joined Matt.
It was probably Matt Rory who was co-hosting with you. Anyway, this is episode 101. Like I said, CLNS Radio has been on the air almost nightly, BPaul, with pre- and post-game coverage of every Boston Celtics game. And though our guest tonight is not a former Celtic, he's not even a current player, this show will be revolving around. Welcome back to the Celtics Late Night Show live right here on www.clnsradio.com. I'm Nick Gelso, as always, joined by Brandon Paul, and also joined by Nick Santacandro, who was the inspiration behind getting John Amaechi on our radio show tonight. John will be with us very momentarily. Nick, why don't you just kind of give us the title of the article, what the inspiration behind it was, and I guess, of course, John stumbling into the article and commenting on it, which was a shock to the entire network.
Yeah, the article I composed, probably about, honestly, probably about 2 months ago. It was entitled "The Black Cloud in Sports and the Best Hope for Change," and its best hope for change. I'm sorry. You know, I stumbled across John's story, and I remember hearing briefly about it. You know, when he officially released the book and his story became a little bit more public, I stumbled across his name again over the ESPN headlines when he was commenting over, gay athletes in England or London, I believe. It was an ESPN story, and it caught my interest, and I started to look more into his story and did a little bit of research, and I found his story phenomenal. I found the courage that he displayed just inspiring, and for someone to have the bravery to do what he did, I really thought that it was something that should be recognized and appreciated a bit more. And I feel like it at the time it didn't get the publicity that it probably should have deserved. And I really hope that people enjoyed and got something out of it. Really the premise of the article was, detailing how he was hopefully going to be a trailblazer for other athletes in similar situations, and hopefully his story can encourage other athletes or other individuals, never mind just athletes, encourage those individuals to come out with their story and hopefully give them
very well said, Nick. And of course the article could be found right here on CLNS Radio. Really an insightful, excellent article. Well said, a lot of thought put into it. That being said, it is it's about 2:30 in the morning over in the UK. That's where Mr. Amaechi is from. Let's bring John Amaechi live with us now. John, welcome to the Celtics Late Night Show, where we are really honored to have you with us.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.
Pleasure to have you. Now, honestly, on the line right now is myself, Nick Gelso. I know you were in our screening room. You heard Nick Santacandro talk a little bit about the article that he composed, and also Brandon Paul, who is in the process of getting himself back into our studio. He'll be with us momentarily. But until then, Nick, we've all prepared a list of questions, and Nick, why don't you take lead right here? You're the guy who got this all together. So there's a lot more to John's story besides the gay aspect. Obviously, very successful athlete and a successful professional now. Nick, go ahead, lead it off, man.
Oh, terrific. First of all, I really want to thank John for coming on, and also, for taking the time to read the article. It really meant a lot to me to know that you took the time to read the article. Really, I want to start off talking a little bit about your playing career and then move on to your story, specifically, what the book was centered around and, what you've been doing since your playing career has ended. I want to start off talking a little bit, though. You suffered a freak injury early on in life. Can you talk a little bit about what happened and how that affected your ability on the court?
Yeah, certainly. I think most people don't know that when I was 16, I went on a field trip with school and ended up, like an idiot, putting my hand through a plate glass window. Simply, it was a big plate glass window in the door, and I pushed the door open with the glass. My hand went right through, and it cut every tendon, every nerve, every artery in my right hand. So basically, my hand was hanging on there with the bones. And so obviously, my right hand is my strong hand. I went into hospital. I was out for 8 months. Couldn't write, couldn't move it. It was in this weird traction splint for a long time. The impact that it had on my basketball game. I just started to play basketball probably just before my 17th birthday, so it was just around about the same time. And what it meant was that as I came back from the injury, trying to make it so I could write again, never mind play basketball, everything I did was with my left hand. And anybody who ever saw me play, and certainly every NBA scout I ever met, commented on the fact that all I did was go left. And that was because my left hand essentially became my strong hand because of the injury. So in a way it was handy because I'm not the fastest. I was never the fastest. I was never an athlete in terms of my ability to jump, but the fact that I could use my left hand so well did serve me well.
Terrific. And obviously that as a center, that's a terrific asset to have, on your side, being able to use both hands, especially down low. You were told early on in college that you were not a Division I player, based on ability, and this is based on what you said in your book. How did that motivate you in life to continue to pursue a dream?
I think I was really lucky in that I had a roommate, a guy called Matt Maloney, who actually won a championship with Houston. And he and I were at Vanderbilt at the same time, and he and I were told by our coach at the time, a guy called Eddie Fogler. He was a North Carolina assistant for a long time. We were told by him that neither of us had what it took to play Division I basketball, and in fact he told me specifically if I wanted to play basketball I needed to go to a Division II or III school. Luckily I ignored him and ended up going to Penn State. And, you know, people will know that at that time Penn State was, it still isn't really known as a basketball school, but it was entering the Big Ten, so I suddenly ended up in this league playing against superstars, the Fab Five as they were, all the great players you remember from Indiana, and Wisconsin and Minnesota, who ended up in the league as well. And I just ended up with this great opportunity where I got to bang a little bit. I didn't have to be the kind of skywalking athlete that I think you have to be in the SEC or some of the other leagues. And in fairness, I had a coach who really took my career seriously and helped me to take the next big steps up.
Well, John, this is Brandon, and I apologize for having to step out, but I do appreciate you joining us tonight. I mean, we're talking here about your playing for Penn State. Following Penn State, you went undrafted in the NBA. That had to be one of the hardest moments as a player I could ever imagine. Could you explain a little bit how you felt? You're going into draft night, you're thinking you're going to be drafted, and the emotions that go along with not hearing your name called that evening.
It's tough, actually. I mean, I sat in, I was with a family who'd taken care of me all through high school. I went to 1 year of high school in this country as well, in America as well. And I was sat in the living room there, and I'd had all the same conversations with teams about, I'd been through, the NBA equivalent of the combines and the tournaments and the season workouts. And people had said great things to me. And I sat there and I watched name after name after name, people who certainly I felt that I'd really competed against really well during the season, but who were definitely better athletes, more stereotypical NBA bodies, if you like, go ahead of me. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't imagining I was going to be a first-round draft pick or a lottery pick or anything, but I thought I'd be in the mix somewhere. So to end that night with my name not being called there was like a lead weight on my shoulders for the next few days before I just had to think, now I have to do it the hard way. I mean, it's coming from England, starting playing basketball, roughly at the age of 17, knowing that I was playing basketball in a country where nobody knew what basketball was really at that time. I'd always done things kind of the difficult way, and this was just another extension of that. I had to get whip myself into shape and get ready to try out on a team.
Well, we're talking with John Amaechi, and John, you attended Penn State. You discussed that previously, and right now, from what I hear, you're doing some stuff with Penn State, and you're taking some steps to help them recover from the scandal that rocked their campus and rocked their society there in Pennsylvania. Can you speak a little bit about your relationship with Penn State at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it's been really difficult. No more so for me, I don't imagine, than other Penn State alumni. But it used to be that people would introduce me, whether it be at speaking engagements or wherever else, and they would talk about my bio and talk about going to Penn State, and I would feel with pride at that because Penn State was so important to me. And nowadays, it's very hard for me to hear Penn State and my name said in the same sentence, simply because of what's gone on. I'm hoping that we'll be able to see some real action in terms of changing the culture, but it's really tough to change a culture that's been entrenched for a long time. People will know it's not just Penn State. There are other universities out there where we can honestly say that the power of sports has become a bit disproportionate, where people's idea of what's important on campus has moved from educating, the holistic education of young people, to how do we make this sporting team so big that they can feed the entire university. And I think at some point the perspective was lost, and the importance of saving young people came second to saving the reputation of a football program. I'm hoping to stay involved and help them change that.
John, now, obviously, when you were there, obviously, Joe Paterno was there. You're not that old, John, that you were there before Joe Pa. But I guess my question being, how much, I mean, I'm from Pennsylvania, obviously, in PA, Joe Pa, I've said in interviews around, he's kind of like, quote-unquote, everybody's grandpa. And when you were there, obviously, Paterno took a really big center stage as far as sports recruiting went, and how much does that hurt now, taking the scandal out of the equation, just the fact that Joe Paterno didn't act alone, he didn't act on the whole scandal, the whole crime. How much does that hurt the integrity of the university?
Hugely. It hurts the university hugely. People, I've said this a number of times, but I don't believe you can be a part-time man of principle, or a part-time person of principle. So, especially when you look at this situation, and regardless of whether you believe that Joe Pa knew all the details or not, and nobody knows that at this point, I don't think. People knew something was up, and not just him. People in lots of influential positions knew something was up and did not act. And I think when parents are thinking about where to send their children, where parents are thinking about where to send their kids for summer camp, when parents are alumni are thinking about who to support, these principal issues, to me, are primary. So I think there's been a big hit on the university, a big hit on the reputation. I think a lot of the athletes, former athletes I know, including myself, who was a part of that second mile program, we were out there trying to encourage these young people that we knew were from deprived backgrounds. We all feel like we are unwittingly complicit in all this, that we've somehow been dragged into something and our names have been sullied too. So there's a lot of work to do to make up for a couple of decades, by all accounts, of mistakes.
All right, folks, you're listening to the Celtics Late Night Show live at www.CLNSRadio.com. We're on the line with John Amaechi, former NBA player. If you have a question for Mr. Amaechi, the call-in number is toll-free. It's 877-784-3047. Nikki, go ahead.
Yeah, John, in reading your book, Man in the Middle, which I'll give a little bit of a plug for, terrific read. I actually just recently finished it up. I've been kind of pecking away at it, and I really enjoyed the book, and it was very well done. One of the things that really stood out to me was how you detailed your relationship with your mother. Can you talk a little bit about what she meant in your life and in your career?
I think everybody needs someone who they look at and they think is slightly superhuman, slightly magic. And I was very fortunate that in my life my mom was that person. She was my guide from the very beginning, and she made it seem like even when I came up with stuff that I think regular parents would think of as ridiculous or crazy. I mean, imagine your 17-year-old son, for people listening, their 17-year-old son who's never touched a basketball before, who's never shown any aptitude towards physical activity before, suddenly he shows up and says, I'm going to play in the NBA. Most parents would laugh that down, or at the very least tell them how ridiculous it was. But my mom, when I told her that, although she didn't, she wasn't clapping her hands with excitement, she said, this is a really difficult path. How are we going to do this? She helped me make the plan. So I feel very fortunate that although I didn't have my mother for as long as I would have liked, she died of cancer while I was in college, actually. The fact is that she was the kind of person that made my life as it is possible.
Yeah, I guess it would be safe to say that, it sounds, from reading the book and, from hearing your response there, it seemed like she, empowered you to give you the confidence to try new things, to take chances, and to just get yourself out there. Was there any one person that you can give credit to, maybe it's her, that gave you the confidence to come out as openly gay when you did?
I don't know if there was any one person. I think the thing I was very fortunate with was that, a lot of people think that I came out in 2007 when the book came out. But the reality is, if a person knew me, whether that be my teammates, whether that be my friends and my family. They'd known for 20 years before that. So this is the book was simply telling everybody and everybody else in the world, because I thought it was important that people had a new face on gay people in general, instead of it just being, I don't know, somebody from Queer Eye for the straight guy or something. You get to see a different perspective. I thought that was important. But my whole life prepared me for that, and I'm very fortunate that although I don't have hundreds of friends, the friends that I have are strong and help me be resilient in the face of what was at times a bit of a trying moment in my life. So I suppose I got really lucky that I had the right kind of people around me at the right time.
John, you talk about friends of yours and obviously friends in your personal lives, but when you're talking about the NBA, former teammates, coaches, were people back when you played aware? Was that something that you were public about or open about as far as relationships and your sexual orientation?
I think, what people will tell you in the league, there are lots of guys who are out. They just aren't out to every fan. But there are lots of guys who are out to the members of their team, if not all of their team. I certainly know that my teams knew when especially Orlando and Utah, especially, including Doc. It was never a factor for them. I mean, you see what the last thing on Doc's mind when he was asked this question in 2007, when they asked him if they knew if he was surprised by me coming out, he just wasn't surprised because he'd been around me for 2 years. So you can't hide yourself from people that you spend almost every working day with. So for me, I was really lucky that for the vast majority of my teammates, they were, at the very worst end, it was don't ask, don't tell, so we just didn't talk about it. But at the best end, it was people who actually they looked at me as their friend and their colleague and their teammate, and anything else was immaterial. So I was fortunate in that case.
Doc as a coach, obviously, he's accomplished as a coach. As a man, he's very well respected. You say that Doc obviously, wasn't surprised, or when he was asked about it, wasn't surprised. Was he supportive? Or was it just don't ask, don't tell, and pertains in reference to Doc?
No, there were very few people. Although a lot of people said very nice things about me, there weren't that many people who actually got in touch and talked to me. And Doc was one of them. And Anne-Marie, who's his longtime assistant. Not assistant coach, but assistant in the office. She was also there when Doc was coaching in Orlando. And strangely, people might think Karl Malone. Those were the two people that immediately got on the phone and said, whatever you need, I'm here.
Karl Malone?
Yeah.
Now, so Karl Malone... Go ahead.
He and I are diametrically opposed in every sense. He's a spokesperson for the NRA. I think guns are bad. he is as Republican as they come. I am as loony liberal Democrat as it comes. But the fact is, he's a good example of how you can maintain and sustain friendships and true, authentic relationships that go beyond the factors that somehow certain political types have decided should divide us.
That's so interesting because I remember when I was a kid, when Larry Bird found out about Magic Johnson having HIV, Karl Malone was one of the guys that was really repulsed by it, wouldn't play with Magic, and Larry Bird got into it with Karl Malone. Not to say that homosexuality and HIV, not to make any sort of connection whatsoever, but being the Republican that he is, the rigid man that he is, in a Mormon state with a Mormon owner, it's hard to believe that some of your best memories were in Utah, and Karl Malone was one of the guys who came, reached out to you.
Yeah, he and his wife both were just really good about it. I think he's gone on since his time with Magic, he went on a learning curve and grew up a little bit. But people shouldn't be surprised about Utah, because I tell people often it's the gayest place I've ever lived. So there's something about repressive societies that they do tend to produce a pretty colorful counterculture.
Well, John, you mentioned before that how your teammates knew that you were gay, and I mean, with the media today, we all know the media likes to jump on anything like that. Are you surprised that didn't come out to the general public prior to your book? Are you surprised about that at all?
No, I'm not really, because I think it's just like today. In fact, there are a lot of things that are going on in the league that you as journalists might know about, but wouldn't necessarily print. And I know perhaps this puts you on the spot to even say that, but a lot of the people who were in my circle of people who knew about my life while I played were journalists, prominent journalists for ESPN and other networks, who just knew not that this was not a topic of conversation for the media. This was a topic of conversation for having a beer after a game with me, but not necessarily then taking that onto the news. And I don't know if I'm sure people don't consider that particularly journalistic or fair even. But they just didn't think it was a cause for me to know. Now, I think had I been married with 2 kids and fooling around on the side, then maybe that would have been a different case. They would have felt that maybe I was a hypocrite and I should have been made to come clean. But since that wasn't the case, people just thought, it's my life and that's John, and we leave it at that.
John, this is Nick Santacandro again. John, it was pretty open and widely publicized, the negative reaction of the news, and especially the words of Tim Hardaway. And I'd rather not repeat the phrases that he used. Were you offended at all by any of the negative reception once that news broke? Especially by his comments, or were you surprised at all or offended?
I mean, I'm always slightly offended when people say horrible things about me, especially if I don't feel they're justified. Because I'm a loudmouth, and I'm a pretty polarizing character, as anyone in sports governance in Britain will tell you. So some of it's deserved, but yeah, what Tim said was hurtful. But my problem with what Tim said is that it just showed a remarkable naivety on his part, and also that he didn't understand that when he speaks, hundreds of thousands of people listen, because, as I'm sure people will love to point out, I was an average NBA player, whereas Tim was a superstar. And when superstars speak, I don't know if it should be this way necessarily, because the best players aren't always the best people. The best players aren't always the smartest people. Sometimes some of these players just need to shut up. But the fact is, when they do talk, people listen. And I know so many young people who felt less safe because they heard this superhero of theirs, they heard this superstar say horrible things about them. And that's the kind of responsibility I think that all athletes should take, and not just on this issue. There are any number of things that I think sometimes I cringe when I hear athletes step up and speak, and you just think they don't realize how much power they have in their voice.
That's and that's something I've been saying for a while. That athletes don't realize that the power that they hold over individuals, and obviously that's a negative example. Of the power that they hold. But I feel, and obviously based on reading my article, I feel you were able to utilize the power that you held in a positive light. And technically, you're the pioneer for gay athletes in sports. Are you comfortable with the notion of being that pioneer? Is it a heavy burden on your shoulders being the first? Or did this ever cause you to hesitate? Or did that motivate you to actually come out?
No, I mean, I was never. I would be disappointed if all I am at this point is some kind of gay pioneer. If that's all there is to me, I've always tried to be a role model, and not just in terms of my ability to play basketball or my standing as a prominent, well-known gay person, or or even as a prominent, well-known black person, or as a prominent, well-known British person. I've just tried to be a well-rounded role model, and I thought that coming out in such a public way was an opportunity to just further that into more different areas rather than pigeonhole me into just one. So I hope that the way I behave, that the commentary I make on society, whether it be about gay and lesbian issues or inequality or the Occupy movement or whatever else, I hope that is just a part of me and not all of me.
Well said, John Amaechi. Speaking of John Amaechi, we're live on CLNS Radio, Celtics Late Night Show, live with John Amaechi, former NBA player. Myself, Nick Gelso, BPaul, and Nick Sannicandro are on the line. BPaul has a question for Mr. Amaechi, and then we're going to go to the call lines. Go ahead, Brandon.
All right, thanks, Nick. John, and thus far, you're the only former or current NBA player that has had the courage in coming out. Do you believe, or without naming names, do you believe there are any current or former players that you played with in the NBA that are gay and have yet to have the courage to come out like you did?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly are other gay players in the league right now. I would say this. I mean, I hurry away from the idea of what I did being courageous. It furthered my goals. I felt like it was an important statement to be making at a time when I felt America was going backwards in terms of equality issues in general, never mind just gay and lesbian people, but lots of different types of people I felt were being marginalized. So it fit right into my political ideology to do it. So it wasn't just about courage. And I do think that people need to recognize there are lots of players in the NBA who are out already. They're just not, just their fans may not know, but their teammates know, their friends know, their families know. So they're out in the same way that the vast majority of gay people are out. Because outside of, June during Gay Pride Month, there are very few gay people who walk around with a T-shirt saying, by the way, I'm gay. So they are out. They're just not, you don't know. Don't take offense. You just don't know. It is a big step for a lot of people to go from being, and for me, it makes me a little sad at times when I realized that I started playing basketball at age 17, and 6 years later I was in the NBA, starting in the NBA.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And there's not many people who can say that. And yet at the same time, when people talk about me, and all I have to do is do a little Google search of my name in message boards, and the way I'm spoken about is not the way that you would expect someone who made that journey to be spoken about. So you can imagine when you're asking other players to do that very same thing, other players who may not have a new career as a psychologist waiting in the wings after they finish playing, maybe you can see why they would hesitate.
John, obviously you're a well-educated man, an interesting man, and we definitely want to talk about what you're doing now with your life. For the second, stick on the NBA, and I mean, is this something that you feel is kind of in basketball? Let's put it that way. It's kind of exclusive to the United States as far as some of the homophobia or the ignorance or fear that people have of coming out or having a friend that comes out to them?
No. I mean, I would love to be able to say that it's just a purely American problem and that Britain is really this wonderfully enlightened place. And whilst I think in general society in Britain, we're pretty advanced. We don't have any people who speak like, Rick Santorum, for example. That man would be entirely unelectable in Britain for city councillor, never mind president or prime minister.
And he's from the state of Pennsylvania.
Indeed, probably so. But in terms of sport, we've got some sporting organizations in Britain that knock the socks off American sporting organizations in terms of their ability to be bigoted. We've got some organizations that, you look at the NBA and it's got a lot of women in positions of power, and not just within organizations and within team structures, management, but also within the NBA itself. You can't say that about football in Britain, for example. In the NBA, you've got numerous black, Latino coaches at different levels. In Britain right now, we have 0 black coaches. Mm-hmm. So it's not just in terms of homophobia. There are plenty, unfortunately, of bigoted organizations still currently doing quite well in Britain.
John, we're going to go now to the call line. We have Mike on the line. Mike is the gentleman that was engaging you in the commentary on that article. He's pleading to get on the line with you, so we're going to bring him live now. This is Mike Munger, the Scotsman. You're live with John Amaechi.
Hey, guys. How are you? John, pleasure to speak with you.
Nice to talk to you.
Look, let's just let me get the confusion out of the way. Again, we appreciate you coming on the network and everything that you do. There was some obvious confusion in everything that I wrote and in everything that you wrote, and a lot of stuff could have been misconstrued because you can't always sense what somebody means in text. So I'll say right now, I'll apologize for any confusion because, again, I never condoned anything that Tim Hardaway said. The only point that I was trying to make to everybody that it was his right as an American to have his opinion on the subject, and regardless of whether or not everybody agreed or disagreed with it, they had to respect the fact that that was his opinion, despite the fact that it was a ridiculous opinion to begin with. So I hope that we can kind of get that out of the way, and you understand that I wasn't looking to bash you, or I wasn't doing any kind of any kind of gay bashing on the site when I was responding to the article.
No, not at all, and I didn't think so at all. I really didn't. I think my point with people who say stupid stuff, and by this I mean Tim, because what he said was deeply moronic. And I've said that to his face, so this is not talking behind his back. My problem with it is that the first part is true. Everyone has the right to say it. It's one of the brilliant things about America, the right that does not exist everywhere, not even in Britain actually, to say whatever you want to. But what I love about Britain is that we have this thing where you have the right to say mostly what you want to, apart from the whole fire in a theater and stuff like that. But when you do say it, if it's ridiculous, you are universally, in fact, people take it as a personal responsibility to make sure you realize how stupid you are. Whereas I think sometimes in America, people use the freedom of expression clause as an excuse to say stupid stuff and then mandate that people respect it because they said it. I heard Santorum the other day say, well, this is what I believe, and then people are supposed to respect that because it's what he believes. And the fact is there's a huge body of science out there that says what he believes is bull. And I just think sometimes we've got to call people when you're allowed an opinion, but if you say it in a public space, be prepared for that opinion to be thoroughly lampooned. I suppose that's where I come from.
Absolutely. All right. Getting off that, there's actually a few questions I want to ask you that are, I guess you could say general questions about stuff that's not related to the article, because I just kind of want to get your opinion as not only as a former NBA athlete, but as somebody who grew up in the United Kingdom, because as they told you, they call me the Scotsman because I was in fact born in Scotland and I grew up part of my life there, so I come from the same area as you, just a little bit farther north. Just for fun's sake, I just want to know which soccer team that you supported when you were growing up, because I grew up a pretty big Liverpool fan, watching Ian Rush and Kenny Dalglish. I'm just curious as to who you happened to support when you were growing up over there.
Yeah, I always disappoint people here slightly because I live in Manchester, which is a city with two great teams, Manchester City and Manchester United, and I just don't watch. The last football game I saw was in 1976, Manchester City versus Manchester United derby game, and I don't remember who won. That's the last one I watched. I can always think of something better to do with my time than watch a football game.
Soccer.
If I had to be pushed, soccer for you. If I had to be pushed, I would go for Man United simply because that's my brother-in-law's football team, and for the sake of peace, I go with that.
That's funny. I'm always curious as to how British athletes that aren't involved with soccer show their support to the teams over there. It's always a curiosity of mine. I'm not sure how much you follow the NBA. If this has been asked before I got on the line, I apologize. But the NBA is different even now from when you retired and you got out of basketball. A lot has changed. Another member of the network that I have a show with, Tim Donaghy, when his scandal kind of came out and rocked the NBA universe, there was a lot being said about the way the officiating is. There are a lot of fans, and myself included, who are skeptical about the legitimacy of certain things that go on with the NBA, especially when you see stars like LeBron, Derrick Rose, Dwayne Wade. I mean, the way the game's officiated now compared to the way it was back in the 80s and 90s when you were growing up and you basically first got into the NBA. I mean, when you watch the game today, does it upset you to see that the way the game is, I guess the term that we use over here is the game is a lot softer and how athletes are more coddled and how the game is more geared towards wing players where they want to try and make the game exciting, but they kind of take the excitement out of it with all the free throws? I mean, what is your opinion on the state of the NBA right now compared to the way it used to be when you had Bird, Magic, Jordan, and players actually had to earn their respect on the court as opposed to being handed a lot of the stuff because of a reputation they have before they even get into the NBA?
Yeah, I think, to be perfectly honest, everybody knew that certain players had certain abilities to get away with certain things. I love Karl Malone, but that man, when I played against him especially, he would travel every time he caught the ball into the turnaround jump shot. I mean, I'm sorry, Karl, but you did. And and it wasn't a little travel. Sometimes it was like 5 steps. And no wonder you couldn't block his shot. And you just knew that that's what would happen and you could live with it. But there was an element of, the fact is that when he had the ball in his hands, he'd earned the due that he got because he was that skilled. He would come up with those clutch shots. He'd make those great passes. He would fight through a level of defense that I don't think you see now in terms of physicality. He would be beaten up some nights. I know because I was one of the people doing it to him. You would just do whatever it took, and that meant you would take him down. Whereas nowadays, I do think there's an element of you just can't touch people without getting some kind of extreme foul called. So that's a problem. But I'll tell you this: the NBA comes over to Britain every year, 2 or 3 times, and last time they were here, I was talking to Dikembe Mutombo and Robert Horry. And we were talking about the league, and the big difference we see is in the players. It's in the fact that it sounds awful, this sounds like granddad talk, but we were saying that back in our day, and obviously they had illustrious, great careers, but I had the privilege to play against them both. Back in our day, players really felt that being in the league was not just a right, but a responsibility. There were guys out there who felt, especially you look at the philanthropy of Dikembe Mutombo, he's carried on post-career too. Guys really felt like they had a responsibility to perform every day to the very, very best, and also to be something better, and to kind of foment something better off the court too. And I think those two things, there's some rule differences for sure. There's some differences in the way the games are refereed, I believe. But the biggest disappointment for me, and I think for a lot of veteran players, is how the players act on and off the court.
Well, John, a little off topic here. I mean, you're an intelligent guy, a good public speaker, so I have to ask, is a career in coaching something you'd ever pursue? I mean, with an NBA D-League team or any sort of NBA basketball team in the future?
Oh, God, no. No, I have a club here in Manchester, and I coach the coaches here. We are the most successful basketball team in Britain, but that's probably like saying we're the most successful, I don't know, soccer team in Texas. It probably doesn't mean an awful lot, but I take great pleasure in helping our young coaches, several of whom have gone off to coach in Europe and coach. A couple will go off to coach in America, I think, in college as well. And I take great pleasure in that, but I like my job. Being a psychologist is what I've always wanted to do since I was 7. Basketball took me away from that for a while, but now I'm doing what I love. So the coaching the coaches is a sideline, but I can't imagine doing it for a living.
John, you mentioned, obviously we're talking about, what you've been doing since, you retired from basketball. Can you talk a little bit about what you do today? Now that basketball really, obviously the NBA basketball isn't a part of your life. What have you found yourself doing now that your career in the NBA has ended?
It's probably split into a couple of different areas. I have my own community center here in Manchester, which has about 2,500 kids a week going through our doors. So we're big. We've got a purpose-built facility with health and fitness center and offices for our staff and homework rooms and everything else. So I'm hopefully fulfilling my responsibilities as a responsible former athlete. And then my business, my work is I work with a lot of medium to large size companies that are trying to be better, trying to survive the recession, trying to make their environments better for their employees and their managers better leaders. And so I really enjoy the fact that I get to do the community type stuff with the young people a couple of days a week, and the rest of my time I'm flying usually to America or to Europe, mainland Europe, to work with my business. So I get the best of both worlds.
Perfect. Hi, John, I just have one final question for you.
Nikki, you're breaking up. John, could you hear Nick?
No, I couldn't. Sorry.
All right. Yeah, we lost the connection with Nick. I have a question.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you
Yes.
now, Nick. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. John, a brief question for you, one of my final questions for you. Can you talk about how you were able to come across the article? I got to admit it was quite a surprise to find my email box with John Amaechi in my email box. And it was kind of funny because that day I was a big autograph collector and I was looking through my old autographs, and I just happened to stumble across and find that I actually had one of you from your Utah Jazz days. So
if you hold on to it for long enough, if you hold on to that for long enough, it'll be worth about 28 cents.
There you go.
Can you talk about how you were able to come across the article?
Yes, there's a woman in my office called Helen who is essentially in charge of me in every way possible. But she, a couple of years ago, she got really upset that every once in a while she would hear from other people about things people were saying about me. I've told her not to worry about it. It's just one of those things you have to deal with. But now she has like a Google alert or something like that. So it's every time my name shows up on a it's not for web pages actually, but it's for blogs and things like that and boards. So every time my name shows up on one of those, because that's the places where normally the really horrible stuff is said, she finds out about it, and then if she thinks it's important enough, she sends it to me. And I saw your article, and I thought, because it was well written, because you obviously put time into it, I should at the very least, put in my 5 cents as well. So that's how I got hold of it. Normally, it's me ignoring yet another horrible comment, but it was really nice to see, especially and unfortunately still unusually on a sports-focused board and web page, some really reasoned, well thought out ideas.
Well done, Nick. Now that card is worth 33. Nick, he gave you a nickel, so that card's worth 33 cents. That ought to be
nice.
It's actually a photo, believe it or not. I went the whole 9 yards on that one. It's an 8x10.
I'm telling you, in this economy, 33 cents, you never know when you'll need it one day.
There you go. Nick, well done with the article. Obviously, John Amaechi, we appreciate your time. Just a couple more NBA-related questions. Now, obviously, we're a Celtics-based site here. We have a slight bias towards the Boston Celtics. You've had, in your playing career, obviously, the great Jerry Sloan coach you, but you've also had a guy named Doc Rivers coach you, who's our long-tenured coach now. Talk to us a little bit about Doc as a coach.
I think I loved playing for Doc Rivers. He understood what it was to be professional. The idea that when you were on the court, when you were in practice, when you were traveling, your focus was the game. But outside of that, you needed to escape from it at least for some moments during a season. I know it's not the longest season this season, but normally 100-odd games. And one of the things he knew better than any other coach I'd ever played for was he knew when teams needed more practice and when they needed less. Nearly every NBA player tells you they need less practice. But he would be really attuned to the idea that, wow, this team is sluggish, this team looks tired. Or I remember we went on one road trip where we arrived somewhere at 2 a.m, as is the case sometimes, and as he got off the bus, he said, right, practice tomorrow, 10 o'clock, and there was absolute silence on the bus, nothing. Nobody moaned, nobody complained, there was just nothing. So we got off, we all got to our rooms, and then about half an hour after we'd been sat in our rooms, suddenly I got a call in the room, and Doc had the assistants were calling around saying, no practice tomorrow. We'll have a meeting in the afternoon. And we had a meeting in the afternoon, and we were all like, why did you cancel practice? He said, because when I said practice is at 10 and no one complained, no one said anything, I knew that we didn't need practice. I knew that we couldn't have practice. So he's just really attuned to the players, and I think he has an ability to get the best out of you. Because I'll tell you, when I played for him, I would have died for him.
That's great to hear. That's how BPaul feels about co-hosting with me, John.
I believe it. It comes
John,
through loud and clear.
Well, no.
Go ahead, Brandon.
I mean, I know earlier John mentioned how everyone needed someone superhuman in their lives, and I said, like, in the chat room, I mean, Nick, I'm that person to Nick.
Oh, thanks. You are, Brandon. You're larger than life, Brandon. John, getting a little more serious now and kind of, I guess, wrapping this up. You've spent a lot of time with us, and it's after 3 a.m. there in England. Obviously, young people are listening to this show, old people are listening to this show, and undoubtedly there is a scared gay athlete out there right now who's in the closet, who doesn't know where to turn. He's hiding it for his life from everybody. What advice would you give to that man, young man, right, or woman right now?
I give the same advice to them as I would give to a 16-year-old high school kid or whoever. The reality is you have to find at least one person, just one person with whom you can connect. And this is not about a relationship in terms of a romantic one. Just someone with whom you can be yourself. Everyone needs that. Every NBA player I've ever met who was any good says the same thing, regardless of whether they're straight or gay. They say, the reason I could survive for 16 or 18 years in the league is because I had that one person that I could go home and just be me. I didn't have to be my number. I didn't have to be NBA superstar. I could just be me. And that's what I would say to this athlete. They need to find one person that they can go to, that they don't have to worry about whether they're using the right gender-neutral pronouns. They don't have to worry about whether they let it slip who they like or who they don't. Someone who they can just be themselves with. If you do that, you'll be more successful whether you end up telling the world or not. If you do that, it'll give you an ability to get through.
Well said. Well said. John Amaechi, you could find a link to his website right on CLNS Radio. At the bottom of the page, there's a blog roll. Amaechi Performance Systems is the #1 link right now on the blog roll. Be sure to check out what John Amaechi is doing now. We can't thank you enough for your time, John. And while we let you go, we got to ask you, are the Celtics going to compete for a title this year? Can they get into the top 4 in the Eastern Conference standings?
I think I've played on a team with Doc where every day people underestimated us because we were too old, because we didn't have it anymore, because any number of different reasons. And I think there'll be a lot of reasons that pundits will give why the Celtics can't win anymore. But I've played under Doc Rivers, and I know the kind of loyalty that he inspires. I see no reason why that won't be just as effective now as it has been for the Celtics in the past.
Well spoken, well said. John, great time spending with you here, and we really appreciate your time. We appreciate you commenting on the article. We hope you'll go back and read our network. Just overall, great experience, John. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it. We hope we could get back on here again sometime soon.
You certainly will. I'll make you do it at 2 o'clock in the morning your time instead of mine.
We'll do it when the Celtics are – how about this? Celtics go out west West Coast trip. We do post-game of every single game, even the West Coast games. We'll do it 2 a.m. our time next time. We'll get you on the show for a post-game show.
Perfect.
Thanks, John. Have a great night, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. To you too.
BPaul, interesting, intriguing. What a well-rounded guy, beyond the fact that he was an NBA player and played with or for, great.
CLNSRadio.com, the home of Internet Sports Talk Radio.